What if I told you that there was a way of getting a really great locomotive for under £50? A great model that really does still hold its own. It's a big hello to you. It's so great to see you, and I hope I find you well. I'm Jenny Kirk, welcoming you up here to a Weir Yard. Today we're talking bargains. We're on a bargain hunt again. And it's a hot topic. It's always a hot topic, talking about price of models. And I'm on the lookout for great models at great prices, so I can let you know what to look out for yourself to grab a bargain. And today my eyes have firmly rested on a model that I keep seeing time and time again across second-hand tables and on websites that also deal in second-hand as well, at a really great price. In fact, sub £50 for as new mint in boxed examples of what actually is a great model that really does still hold its own. I am of course talking about the Bachmann N Class Mogul. It was one of their frontline pioneering models when they brought out the Blue Ribbon range, and for a great many years it was a stalwart of their fleet and a great many people's model rail fleets. But the models have been overtaken by a lot of new items that have come through over the years and have probably been relegated to the very back of the catalogues if they do appear at all. In fact, I think they've only had one outing comparatively recently, and a lot of them ended up getting remaindered on the shelves, which was really quite sad to see, because the N Class, as you can see there behind me, I've got 4 of them. One of those I picked up for under £50. How, you may ask? Well, I'm going to show you, and I'm going to show you as well that these models are incredibly easy to DCC fit too. So don't let the fact that they're not DCC ready put you off if you're in fact a DCC modeler. We're going to do a full step-by-step install and show you how to get these bad girls running on your layout for a great price. Don't forget to tickle the like button, and if you really do enjoy what you watch, please share it to social media and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already done so. But come with me in association with Train-O-Matic, makers of DCC decoders and accessories that are designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts. Shop the entire range available today at tramfabrique.co.uk. Additional support comes from...
This is Clark Railworks, and this is what we do. You'll know us from Ellis Clark Trains, and you'll get the same friendly expertise with us too. We've got a huge range of pre-owned model railways from all your favourite manufacturers, and maybe some you hadn't heard of before. It's the place to come for quality. We don't stock substandard models, and everything we sell is fully tested and photographed by model railway experts. No matter whether you model double O gauge, N, HO or more, we have sought after models from all around the world with new listings added every weekday. Check out what's available now at clarkrailworks.com and don't miss out on your latest loco.
But everyone loves a bargain, me included. I've been mystery shopping and I've picked up sub £50, a locomotive that promises to be a little bit of a diamond in the rough. With a bit of polish, she's going to be a maid of the fleet. Come with me and I'll show you what I've got. What if I told you that there was a way of getting a really great locomotive for under £50? In this day and age, prices do seem to keep going up and up and up, and unfortunately it does appear to be a fact of life at the moment. But I've been on the hunt for some bargains, and there's a particular type of locomotive that I've been finding time and time again at a really great price, and that is the N Class locomotive from Bachmann. It's been around a while. In fact, I think it was one of the first, if not the first, blue ribboned locomotive that they released way back in, I think these came out originally in the late 1990s, and it was heralding a new age in models whereby they were being made out in China, being made to a really high standard that we'd never seen ready to run at an affordable price in the UK before. Because these models are so old, they're not actually DCC ready unless you've got the very latest iteration from Bachmann, and even then they come with a basic 6-pin decoder socket. But by and large, if you find a Munsell N Class, you're going to find that it is not billed as DCC ready. But I found that a lot of retailers are also misidentifying these as split chassis locomotives. They are not. But that means that you will find these at a really great price. And I have mystery shopped this from Rails of Sheffield. You can see there on the end. I paid £49.50, so under £50 for this. The box, shelfware that you might expect from what is nearly a 20-year-old model. N Class number 1864 in the Malachite Southern Green. And actually this was a livery that I didn't already have, but they've been done by Bachmann in the Malachite Green, in the Southern Munsell Green, which I do have a couple of, with and without smoke deflectors. They've done the BR lined black livery, and also there's a special of number 810 in the Southeastern and Chatham Railway Austerity Grey, which is a lovely model which comes in a twin pack with a Mansell Green Southern Railway liveried one. And that can be had at a really great price that actually puts each locomotive at probably no more than £50 each. And they're exactly the same mechanically as this one that I have found. Now, there was no special deals or anything. I just bought this off the website. No favours were pulled. Didn't make a big deal about who I was. And this is what came based on the listing on their website. It's still got all the paperwork, and what's interesting is that you can see there at the front we've got this plastic insert which is to stop the locomotive from rubbing against the polystyrene. We've also got the original blue ribboned thing here, which is something that you would find in these earlier models. It's just a plastic and string thing. And it's still here in the box. Has no value whatsoever, it must be said. We've also got still sealed detailing pack. So that's all the brake rigging and the vacuum hoses. And I think further down in here, we've got some steps too. These go on the front of the locomotive, but they don't come factory applied. Because otherwise it would preclude the locomotive from going around the tightest train set curves. But the fact that we've got all these sealed in the original packaging is making me think that what we've actually got here is an incredible bargain. And for anybody who's thinking you've just bought it from Rails and that means that it's gone off the website, I've been seeing these come up time and time again. That's the piece there that's just protecting the front. Again, this is something that normally goes in the bin if the loco's been out of the box for long periods of time. And looking at the wheel treads, we've actually got a reasonable shine on those. They don't look to have particularly been run. And yeah, I'm looking at those. It's probably been no more than test run, maybe at most run in. And I'm just looking over that. There's not even dust on it. Sometimes you find locomotives that have been out of the box for a period of time are dusty, even though they've been put back into their original boxes. And for a 20-year-old locomotive, the telling point would be the coal load tends to pick up the dust or inside the cab. We don't have the printing on the back head, but we do have the moulded detail. If you're really careful, you could quite easily pick that out with a bit of paint. But this locomotive is probably at least 20 years old, possibly a little bit older than that. But this is the start of the high-quality, tooled from fresh models from China. The N Class was Bachmann's flagship locomotive, and it's never been upgraded other than to add in a 6-pin decoder socket on the very latest iteration, simply because it didn't really need it. So I'm showing you this, and you can see we've got the nicely finished metal wheels. We've got couplings in NEM pockets on the back of the tender there, and there's actually a screw-on slimline tension lock on the front bogie. That bogie itself is as per the prototype. We've got chemically blackened rods, and a lovely green finish on those wheels. I don't know why I'm holding it upside down. We've got the multi-passes with the printing, so we get the very, very slender lining on the boiler. We've got metal safety valves on there. We've got, again, a metal whistle. There's quite a lot going on there. The front face of the cab with these very distinctive cab windows with the glazing in there. Really nicely done. The colour rendition is perfect. It's actually the first of these that I've managed to get in Malachite livery with the Southern on the tender. I do have an M7 in Malachite but with British Railways spelt out on it, but this is the first true Southern Malachite liveried loco in my collection. And front face there, really nicely done. These locomotives were originally built, or certainly the first few batches were built without smoke deflectors, although the very latest ones had smoke deflectors from new, and I believe that some of the others did get retrofitted, and this was simply to lift the smoke from the driver's view when it was running. Looking down this side, we've got a lot more pipework detail. We've got that air gap all the way underneath the boiler, wire handrails, additional pipework. There is a little bit of a lid look to that dome, and I think that may be something to do with different options on that. I'm not entirely sure. The cylinders nicely picked out with the malachite green, the lining, and then the black at the end. And let's take a look at that exquisite valve gear as well. That is really nice. It's something that Bachmann has always done really, really well. Very minimal chassis detailing. We do have the brake blocks in as standard. And looking to the underside, there is space to add that additional brake rigging should you choose to. Again, on the tender, there's no tender pickups. That is an upgrade which is quite simple to do if you want to add tender pickups. And it's got this strange close coupling mechanism between locomotive and tender. Sometimes this can be a little bit troublesome, but so far with this, no problems. And we've got a pickup of the 6 driving wheels, which does, I find actually, I do have 3 other N classes in my collection. It doesn't impede the locomotive. I've never found a need to be adding tender pickups. We've got the drop shadowing, the sunshine lettering on the 1854, and the Southern on the tender. Now, this was a livery which these locomotives wore, I think it was just immediately after the Second World War, when they came out from the wartime black livery. They were painted into this as a last hurrah of the Southern Railway. And what we've got here actually is a perfect example. Now, I have looked around and I found these at about this sort of price at Ellis Clark Trains. I found them listed on Hatton's as well, and if anything, Hatton's have got them a little bit lower. I've seen them around the sort of £45, £46 mark, because they think that they're split chassis. And I can tell you now, these are not split chassis locomotives. Out of the box, they're DC, and there's no decoder socket, but I am going to have a go at fitting it with the Train-O-Matic 8-pin decoder. It'll be a hardwire, and I'm going to guide you through that. So we've got a link in the description box down below for where you would find these decoders. And what I would say is you want the wired 8-pin or the wired 6-pin, whichever's in stock. Normally the 6-pin are a bit easier to find at the moment, as we've got a shortage of the decoder processors, but they're actually the same fundamental processor and decoder board. It's just the 6-pin doesn't have wires soldered to 2 of the pads. So whichever is good, because we're going to just cut off the actual socket on this. I'm going to take it over now to the rolling road. I'm going to show you out of the box just how well these actually work. And giving a bit of power there. It's running in reverse, and that is pretty smooth. When you consider that this has been in the box for probably 20 plus years, something like that, we've got a model that just springs straight into life. And I'm going to try that in the other direction, and I can get it to run pretty slow. So that suggests to me that we've got a model here that has maybe at most been run in when it was new, put back in the box, forgotten about. And for just under £50, if you're a DC modeler, this is perfect to go straight onto your layout. If you're a DCC modeler, it's going to take a little bit more work, but I'm going to show you now that hard fitting your locomotives with a decoder isn't actually all that difficult. So we've proven that the locomotive runs really nicely here on DC. When it comes to DCC fitting this locomotive, we do have to do a hard wire, and as I said before, we're going to be using the Trainomatic 8-pin decoder because that's what I've got one in stock. The wired 6-pin, don't get the direct plug, get the wired one, is also perfectly adequate. Either will do depending on what's cheaper, what's available, and we've got a link in the description box for that. To get this apart, first up we need to take the body of the locomotive off, and this is going to involve a couple of screws. So we've got one underneath the front bogie, so really it's quite a simple task to just quickly break free the screw that holds that. It is quite a distinctive screw, so you won't get it confused with others. And you can see there it's quite long. Just take that off. And then the bogie itself slides over the pivot. And we also have underneath this metal spring. Make a note of which way the metal is curved. So it's kind of curving downwards. With those removed, we've got two screws. Ignore the one with the square enclosure, that's actually holding the cylinders to the chassis, and instead we're going for the one behind. On an older model such as this, you may find it's been quite highly torqued, and because it's never been off in over 20 years, I'm going to move up to a slightly bigger screwdriver here. That just gives me a little bit better purchase on this particular screw, and there we go. Take that out, we've got it unscrewed, and I'm just going to use a pair of tweezers just to carefully pluck that out. Put that to one side. Looking to the back, we've got this screw down here. We're just going to undo that. And then with both those screws out, we can just carefully remove the body from the chassis, and as you can see there as well, you can also just maneuver out the mechanism that holds the tender on, and that actually does help us quite a lot, giving us a bit of space here. Inside the model we've got the motor mounted vertically, which drives down on the rearmost axle. There's a bit of circuit board behind it, and that effectively is all you get. And looking to the body itself, there's a lot of weight in this, and just looking down there, the entire boiler is filled with a lead plug, and that is going to mean that we're a very restricted space in here, offering up the chassis. The motor fits towards the front, and effectively all we have got is this space that the circuit board and that wiring takes up. But we've got some really good solder points there and there for the motor, and then we've also got wires coming up here from the pickups on the locomotive, and we're just going to unplug that for now. And then the circuit board itself, we're going to have to remove this because we need the space for the decoder. It's quite easy, it's just two screws, and that circuit board there now is just held by these two small wires. The motor there is held to this bracket by 3 screws, and at this point we've not cut any wires, so if you decide that maybe this is a bit more involved, you want to get somebody else to do it, then you've not actually harmed anything. You can screw this back in, plug the pickups back in, and you're back to where you started. The Trainomatic decoders come with a coating on them, a kind of heat shrink coating that protects all of those electronics from any kind of having issues with touching anything metal. And you can see that these decoders fit so neatly up against that block. That is plastic. There is a couple of screws, but plastic, so that is going to be a perfect fit. And I'm going to introduce to you the rest of what we need. So I've got my solder, which is the S179 from DCC Concepts. Just in case we need it, I've also got some mixed heat shrink, and we can use our wire cutters to cut a short length off this if we need it. We're going to be using some of the flux, again from DCC Concepts. Again, if we need it, we've got the wire strippers. Great tool this for all things electrical around your layout, from doing wiring on locomotives to wiring on your layout. And even if you want to strip back an electrical flex to, say, wire a plug up in your house, these are a great tool for that as well. And bringing up the final tool, just got some needle nose pliers. Again, probably won't need them, but it's nice to have them to hand. Oh, and an old paintbrush that I'm going to use for that flux. So what I'm going to be doing is, first of all, it's easiest to just unsolder these. So I'm going to just bring in the soldering iron, melt that solder, and these two soldering points are going to be where we solder the wires from the decoder to. With black to the front, red to the back was the convention that we had going on with that. So we're going to keep that the same way round, just to make sure that we don't have to change any CVs to be able to get the locomotive to run the way that we want. Now, don't need a lot of these wires, so I'm going to just snip this, I think about there. It's going to be fine. This, incidentally, is quite useful if you want to, say, put a 6-pin decoder onto an 8-pin socket. Then these are handy to keep for little tasks like that. And all I actually need are the red and black, which will go to the track pickups, and then we need orange and grey, and they will power the motor. Everything else on this, unless you're going to go for something a little bit more involved, if you want to add in firebox flicker or anything like that, I'm just going to put out the way. I'm going to actually twist these together just to keep them nice and neat. And then a top little tip for you, I have shared this before. I'm going to bring in some nail varnish, and this is quite garish. No, I don't wear this nail varnish. It came free with a magazine when I was a teenager, but it is perfect for just making sure that any of these wires which you're not going to solder to anything, I always put a little dab on the ends of those wires, and the reason for that is that acts as an insulator. Think of nail varnish as being liquid insulation. You can paint that on, let that dry, and you don't have to worry about mystery shorts that could cause, at the best, poor running, at worst, a blown decoder. Looking to the pickup wires, I'm just going to cut them off, and then I'm actually going to use the bus wire strippers just to bare the ends of these wires. This is quite an easy task with the bus wire strippers. There's one. I've done them possibly a little bit longer than I need. Doesn't matter, just going to put a twist on that one and a little twist on that one, just to make sure that the little strands don't cause a nuisance. Going to bring in our flux at this point, and very carefully, tiny amount of that, just going to wet the ends. That's fine. And then with the soldering iron, just going to put a little bit of solder onto the iron and then just touch it to those wires to tin them. And you'll see that the wires actually just with the flux, it wicks it up really, really well. Just move that out of my way there. So we've got these tinned, and actually I will need some of the heat shrink. This just makes sure that you don't have any mystery shorts, because if these short together, then again, you just have all sorts of issues. And these come in, you can either buy a full pack of one colour, or I like the multi-packs. And on this particular model, all I'm going to need is a short length. In fact, I'm going to cut that in half. Going to be quite stingy. Space is at a premium on this, it must be said. Slide that down onto the wire, and that's the bit which most people forget to do. They solder the wires and they forgot to thread the heat shrink on first, so we're not going to have that mistake. I'm also, now that we've got these tinned, I can shorten that down just to want a little bit of a stub, and we're going to, again on this, red and black always go to the track, so I'm going to bear that one as well. Again, just need a little bit of flux, and there's still a little bit of solder left on the iron, so I'm just going to use that to tin those wires. Just going to trim that down. It's easier to tin these if they're a little bit on the long side. Just a little bit of flux, same again on the other two wires. Never be too stingy with the flux. One bottle goes a very, very long way, so you don't need to be too stingy. I'm going to put a little bit more solder onto the iron and then join those two. They've taken. And then if you need to, then use something like a pair of tweezers, or you can also use the needle nose pliers if you need to. And then we can join those, and then we pull the heat shrink back over that joint. And then with the soldering iron, you don't use the tip. Instead, we're going to use the top bit. And you can see that heat shrink is shrinking. And that should just grip that joint. And again, just carefully shrink that down. And there we go. That's our connection to the pickups done. And what I want to do here now is prepare the next two wires from the decoder. So this is orange and grey powering the motor. You don't need to bear a huge amount of this wire, just a little bit is more than enough. Let's get that straight. Don't trap the other wire that you've just done, you might accidentally snap it off. Again, right, once we've done that, we're back to the flux, just a little bit on the wires, and this is to allow that solder to flow. And then we've got some solder flux, again, just a little bit on those wires. We don't need to actually add any heat shrink to these because we're soldering them direct to those terminals. So what I'm going to do is just very carefully just get in there. And the same with this one in front. And that's got them done. And then I'm actually going to use some of the Captain tape. Again, this is another product that DCC Concepts sell. It's really super thin. So we're going to get a bit of tape. This is for holding the decoder in place. I'm just going to very quickly get a length off there. And what I want to do is I'm going to just stick a length there, get the decoder in place, and then there, all done. So that's good. And then with these spare wires, we can just twist these over and down. If you want to make sure that they stay in place, it's quite easy to use another piece of the Captain tape, and that just makes sure that they don't end up getting jammed in one of the screw holes and then getting churned up when you screw the body back on. So I'm just going to very carefully add another piece of tape over the top and just neaten that up. And you can see that there is our hard wire. Always good practice is to put that now onto the programming track and test it before we put the body back on. So that has tested fine on the programming track, and I also took the opportunity to program in the running number 1854 as the decoder address. And we should now find that we can reassemble the locomotive quite readily, and all of that wiring and the decoder will fit super neatly back into the space that we had before. One of the things that you need to make sure is that these wires are clear of that screw hole. So let's just move those over and then reassembling it. And you shouldn't have to force it. If you're forcing it, you've probably got a wire trapped. Also remember at this point to get the tender into place. That's easy to do before the rearmost screw goes in. We just make sure that that is fine, which it is, and then it's just a reverse of the process that we went through before. So the super long screw goes to the back. Just make sure all is seated well. Make sure we get the right screw. This slightly bigger one is going in at the front. Don't need to over tighten it. And then remember which way round the metal piece went. Let's just make sure that we can get that into place. And then the bogie itself, make sure again, correct way round. Let's get that over the top. And then the screw, get that down in there. Doesn't need over tightening, everything is fine. And again, back to the programming track and just test, make sure that we haven't caused a short if we've trapped any wires. And then it's off to the layout. I'm going to just test this now on DCC, giving it a little bit of power, and the locomotive moves off really smoothly. And it's just testament to how well designed and made these locomotives were back when Bachmann first released them to great fanfare. The fact that they can be got now for under £50 really is a great bargain, and they're well worth looking out for at any model shop where they do occasionally turn up on the second-hand tables and also on websites that deal in second-hand, such as Hatton's, Ellis Clark Trains and Rails of Sheffield. It's a great bargain, and one that certainly you should consider whether you're a DC modeler or a DCC modeler. And there's also perfect scope using a few optional extras from ranges such as the DCC Concepts range that you can upgrade this model with moving the decoder through to the tender using some connectors, add some pickups to the tender wheels, firebox flicker into the cab area, and even lamps front and back. You could very much go to town with this locomotive and make it quite an interesting project to bring this old, cheaper locomotive right up to the standard that you would expect from a brand new model. It's definitely a sleeper hit in the second-hand ranges, and I would well recommend that you look out for these to add to your collection for not too much money. Well, I hope you really enjoyed that and found it informative. And as you saw in that, you don't have to be frightened of hardwiring older models. It's really straightforward. And the N Class, even though it looks like it's just not got very much space at all, it's more than enough space for a nice, neat, tidy DCC decoder installation. And if you're a bit more ambitious, you could move that decoder over into the tender, maybe fit a sound decoder with a speaker, and a lot of other options like firebox flicker and lamps front and back are really quite easy to do. Just get yourself one of those plugs between Locomotive and tender just to pass the wires across, and before you know it, this can turn into quite an enjoyable project, and you'll have yourself a top-notch model as a result. At all of the online sites I've been looking at, I've been constantly seeing these N classes in a variety of different liveries coming up for under £50. Don't believe the listings that try and tell you it's a split chassis model. That's going to work in your favour, because that is pushing the price down, with a lot of companies, even some of the big mail order companies, wrongfully listing these as a split chassis model when they are not, and that makes them ridiculously easy to hardwire on DCC. And it also means that they're a good, reliable runner. You can run them and run them and run them, and they'll keep on going with none of the flaws that beset the split chassis models, which we've all come to hate. But I hope this video has been informative to you. Please leave a comment down below. Let me know what you thought about this project. Is this something that maybe you're starting to look for these N classes even as we speak? Because, well, £50 and under for a high quality tender locomotive really shouldn't be sniffed at. Or maybe you've got some other recommendations for maybe some sleeper hit bargains that you're seeing time and time again, and people are passing them over, and maybe they should take another closer look. It's a great way to expand your fleet without spending too much money. But until next time, this is me, Jenny Kirk, saying please do check us out over on Patreon and help support the channel to keep making the videos that you want to see, and check out our merch store down below as well to get your Billy's Replacement t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, Gronk It Up, Terrier Fest, My Railways, My Rules. It's all there. And until next time, take care, happy modelling, bye for now. Today's video comes in association with Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders and accessories that are designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts. Find the full range available to order now at tramfabrique.co.uk. Additional support is provided by...
This is Clark Railworks, and this is what we do. You'll know us from Ellis Clark Trains, and you'll get the same friendly expertise with us too. We've got a huge range of pre-owned model railways from all your favourite manufacturers, and maybe some you hadn't heard of before. It's the place to come for quality. We don't stock substandard models, and everything we sell is fully tested and photographed by model railway experts. No matter whether you model double O gauge, N, HO or more, we have sought after models from all around the world, with new listings added every weekday. Check out what's available now at clarkrailworks.com, and don't miss out on your latest loco.
I'd like to send out a huge thanks to everybody who supports me on Patreon, but a special thanks go out to Anthony Kidson, Offshore Allen, Michael Lockie, Helen Sink, Gary Lewis, David Quinn, Sparky107107, George Botterini, Chris Moss, Robert Steers, Sam Yates, Dale Williams, John N from NC, NYMRish, Jonathan Foster, Peter, Clifford Ison, Larry W. Grant, NI Railways 4000 class, Ian Coulson, Alan Dickerson, Eddie Popper, Karen Nichol, Medwin Williams, Crossways Point Junction, 3B Rail, Jennifer Horton, Michael Rose, Trains with Nick, and Simon Snow. Thank you. Without you guys, I couldn't do this.